welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage. It's dusk on a Friday night here in December 2024. Friday the 13th. Hope you had a good day. It is LS7 Manifold madness. As things often happen around here, being opportunistic, sometimes you end up with extra parts. So let's recap how I got to where I am today. About a year ago, a little more, I ended up with the Ilmor Engineering dot block. I got lots of videos building that red engine. People ask why it's red. That's the actual Ilmor red paint. If you were an Acker team or a Craftsman truck team, that's the color of your engine. They're easily identifiable. Not my first choice, but the paint is really nice quality, and there it sits. I mean, I've washed the block. It's been handled many times, and there it sits. So that's why it's red. When I got the block and parts to build the short block, if you review the video from about a year ago, I bought a set of offshore heads. I've never had anything LS7 before. The LS engine, cylinder heads go by family, and correct me if I'm wrong, but LS1 is a cathedral port, common stuff. Those were prevalent for X amount of years. Then the LS3 was the first rectangular port like my Suburban has. That has a different bolt pattern. If you look at it, it's not the same as LS7. LS7, the bolts are centered in the port. They go right down the middle of the port, where LS3, they're offset. They're not in the middle. So if you drew a straight line down the ports, this is LS7. LS3 does not look like that. The holes are offset. So initially I bought that set of offshore heads, and I got valves and springs. I have everything to put the heads together, I think, when a much better deal came along from my buddy Charlie. I bought his actual Ilmor Engineering dot cylinder heads. I have the original dot boxes. They're in pieces, but I don't know how many sets of titanium valves and assorted pieces. I can repair those heads as long as I don't put a hole in them. Well, I guess you can weld them too, but I'm in love with the heads. What I'm not in love with, and it's probably only spoken about in hidden circles, but the weirdness that prevails, I've never seen a stock LS7 intake manifold. But if it's like the rest of the LS engines, and while I'm thinking about intake manifold families, I believe the LT is a different manifold, but I don't know, I've never had one. But I have had LS1, LS3, and now I have LS7. So your typical LS architecture, the intake has a nice O-ring, and the head is flat like this. So the offshore heads I bought, sure enough, have a flat surface on the head side, and I bought a Holley 300-269. I'm looking at the box over there. It's a single plane EFI manifold to go with those heads. I got it. It's mocked up in the 55. I've already included a picture with a lift plate on it. It's a very underwhelming manifold. I'm sure it would perform nicely, but the Ilmor engines had a much taller manifold like this. I think they went to the split manifold. And those manifolds start probably in the 1600 range and up. I noticed on the dot heads immediately that the dot heads are just the opposite. The dot head has the O-ring, and the manifold should be flat. And again, only speaking in hidden circles that you have to be a secret member of the club to know, why are there manifolds available that don't say the dot specific? Did other cylinder head companies do that? Why did they do it? This is information I haven't spent a lot of time looking for, but it's definitely a question and something that's been troubling me for a year now. So I bought this offshore rough casting. It's a copy of the $1,600 and up manifolds. It's much higher, Dominator flange. It's unfinished for the fuel rails, but I could have 2 sets of fuel rails. It was $300 and an excellent start, I believe, for the manifold I was going to use. But it sat on the engine for a year, kind of got distracted. I knew I had a fitment issue here where the ARP, the small studs for the heads, hit right there. And I had not researched what I was going to do to fix that. So just a month or so ago, I was all excited. I found this LS7 Holley high ram, knowing full well that it has the O-rings in the manifold. And now I have an O-ringed manifold and an O-ringed head. I don't see that working. I thought about 2 things. One, making a small shim to go in between so the O-ring would seal on either side of the shim, but that seemed kind of hokey. I have an LS7, and they sell them gaskets like you have on a traditional intake manifold where you don't run an O-ring at all. I've seen heads and manifolds, excuse me, for an LS7 that are both flat, that take a gasket. So while still researching all that, it was about a week ago today, I saw that Hogan intake manifold. Hogan is one of the companies very well known for making expensive, exotic intake, custom intake manifolds. I don't think they have any manifolds ready to ship. I think you have to call and order one. I don't know, because I have to talk to them eventually, I suppose. I got a couple questions, but there was a LS7, or it claimed to be, LS7 Hogan manifold, brand new, only mocked up, never ran. And it has the ports for fuel injectors, and it has 2 other ports, I assume for nitrous. They're threaded, but larger than my nitrous nozzles were, but I don't know, I have to research that. But it did not have fuel rails, but it was on the cheapest side. I mean, that manifold, if you called it Hogan, I believe their custom manifolds start around $2,600, and this was listed for $750. And I inquired about it, asked a couple questions. I was trying to figure out, and the guy did not have an answer. It has a plate welded between the runners, and I noticed on the Hogan website there was another LS7 manifold. It had the same support, I guess. I guess it would keep these from V'ing out, but other manifolds aren't like that. But I was just talking to my buddy Charlie. He says, maybe because it's a nitrous manifold, it's for, if the manifold has a pop, maybe it won't blow the studs out of the head or something. Maybe it's to hold the runners in place. I was concerned it was going to hit. I knew I was pretty flexible in this is my steam port kit. This is genuine Ilmor engineering. I'm lucky to have all the pieces for it. And it does fit, kind of. I have the same interference on the 3 notches that belong here. This Holley manifold has them, and this Holley manifold fits flush. So now I can make a template off that, and in the mill, it's like a half moon. I'll just touch the cutter in 6 spots, and that should fix this manifold and that one. I'm not giving up on this one, but that one is much less of a science project. So let's take a closer look at it if you'd like. And while I'm right here, these are the Ilmor fuel rails, and somewhat universal. The spacing is correct. I noticed it's correct on this manifold. I mean, it's in the center of the port, so this should be, if it fits an LS7, fit them all, other than the mounting portion. This I'm gonna have to make my own. On the Hogan manifold, there's a couple studs sticking off there, and I think one of my holes even lines up. It's not the right size, but this is just a piece of flat stock. I can drill through this anywhere I need to match up, as long as my height is correct. So there's a little discovery needs to be done as to what injector I should have, and then I can make the fuel rail fit, I believe. So that shouldn't be too hard. Let's just take a look at it up close. It doesn't fit exactly flat on the head because it's interfering with these bolts that are further down. That's the reinforcement I talked about. This one had a hole drilled in it. Some don't. Don't know why the hole is there. Maybe for wiring or pass through, but I can run my wiring either underneath or through the hole. If I can make everything fit underneath, it would be easier to pull the manifold if you had to. It's beautiful inside. I haven't tried a throttle body on it, but it looks pretty normal. Those are the studs for my injectors, and there's a threaded port here and here. So I assume they were going to spray nitrous, even though there's no, pressure relief on the manifold. Here on the back, there's 3 nice usable ports. This is the most logical spot if you were going to have a pressure relief, a spring-loaded one like a blower manifold would have, like the one on my blower manifold right next door. But it is a pretty handy spot. Probably flat underneath. You could do the same thing under there. I actually have one, but don't know if I'll incorporate it because I'll have blow-offs on the charge pipe. But I'm pretty excited. The Holley studs are too long. That's okay. Other than machining 6 notches into it and maybe giving it a good polish job, modify my injector rails, I think this is a keeper. These are the 3 notches I'm talking about to clear the head bolts. And the most important part of that manifold I neglected to mention, it is flat on the manifold side, so I can just put my O-rings in the dot heads and bolt it on once I make a little clearance. So that's where we stand. I'm pretty happy. That was a big score. Again, the asking price was $750. After I inquired about it, he started dropping the price and put a make offer on it. I bought the manifold for $600, so pretty happy about that. Never thought I'd own a custom. I never thought I'd have an LS engine like that. I was going to build a stock block deal. And, the whole thing is, definitely, more than I expected. In typical Sean fashion, it's all repurposed junk, but that's what I do. I'm never going to go, well, unless things change. That is not in my financial status to do that, but I can scratch and gouge and find parts, and I'm not complaining. So I don't think I'd have it any other way. Have a nice evening. Take her easy.